Before the calendar ever flipped to 2024, center A'ja Wilson was firmly established as an all-time basketball great, having crafted a resume few other players could match. In 2015, just after stepping on campus as a college freshman at the University of South Carolina, the Columbia native helped lead her local program to its first ever Final Four appearance. A couple years later, she led Coach Dawn Staley's Gamecocks to a national championship, crowned as the Final Four's most outstanding player. Then as a senior, she won every possible award as the consensus best player in the nation to cap a collegiate career that just a couple years later would prompt her alma mater to unveil a statue of her, before becoming the consensus first overall pick in the 2018 WNBA draft to the Las Vegas Aces. All she did across her first 6 years in Sin City was win multiple MVPs, multiple Defensive Players of the Year, and multiple championships while never failing to make an All-Star game. All this by the end of her age 26 season in 2023, and that doesn't even include her dominance on the international stage, which included helping Dawn Staley's Americans win gold at the 2018 FIBA World Cup, and again 3 years later at the Tokyo Olympics on her 25th birthday. 14 months after that, she turned in an MVP performance throughout the 2022 FIBA World Cup in bagging another gold, which she could take solace in after kangaroo sightings proved elusive down under. Easily was already one of the most accomplished and decorated players in the history of hoops. And then, 2024 happened. This episode is presented by Delta, the official airline of the WNBA. I first noticed A'ja Wilson's 2024 campaign jumping off the charts on June 21st after she led her Aces to an 11-point win over the 13-1 Sun. It was Vegas's 14th game, and Wilson's 26 points and 16 rebounds that contest launched her up to 389 points and 163 rebounds for the season. Lying herein are the more than 4,500 player seasons throughout the WNBA's first 28 seasons, bookended by 1997 and 2024, all at the same point of their schedule. On the scoring front, none of them were even all that close. She'd scored 12.4% more points than the 346 compiled by runners-up 15 Elena Deladon and 08 Diana Taurasi. Meanwhile, on the glass, she resides here above north of 99.8% of all the other entrants, surpassed only by a couple Sylvia Fowles seasons, a couple Yolanda Griffith seasons, 10 Tina Charles, and 17 Jonquel Jones, none of whom were in her stratosphere offensively. And believe it or not, there was even a specific point where 24 Wilson was atop both categories all time. Fast forward a few weeks to July 16th after Vegas played game number 24, when her 653 points were 8.5% better than 14 Maya Moore's previous standard-bearing mark, while her 287 rebounds bested by one the total put forth by rookie sensation Angel Reese in the same season. This is wilt stuff right here. The fact that there exists a point deep within a schedule where the all-time leader in points and the all-time leader in rebounds is the same damn person truly is Chamberlain-esque. A feat that seemed possible only in the era of the Beatles' heyday, instead occurring in the year of our Lord 2024. But an arguably more amusing look is after just another couple games. Following game 26, while she just barely relinquished her hold atop the all-time rebounding leaderboard as her 311 boards trailed the rookie season outputs of Reese and Charles by 1 and 3 respectively, she established a comical scoring distance between herself and 14 more. With a lead of 80 points, that amounted to an advantage of 12.7%. Framed another way, her point total of 711 through 26 games was so high that no one else had ever even reached it through 29 games. Then we have our next major inflection point worth taking a glance at, which is after 32 games. Since all but 3 seasons have featured at least that many games per team, here's a pretty inclusive chart tantamount to the end of some earlier seasons. In it, we see 24 Wilsons tied with 17 Jones for the second most boards, while a 47-point outburst in Game 32 got 06 Taurasi up to 805, a mark still 74 points and over 9% shy of the green dot. And the final number where it's still reasonable to look at raw totals would be through 34 games, a number reached by every team in all but 8 seasons. At that point, 24 Wilson's 406 rebounds would have stood alone atop the rest, but for Reese's preternatural carnage she unleashed on the glass upon her entrance to the league. But she still maintains a scoring lead of more than 8% over the closest seasons authored by Taurasi and Moore. With Wilson's 2024 Aces having played an expanded schedule of 40 games, at this point we'll calibrate to per-game averages to normalize the different season lengths from different years and take one final bird's-eye view of her season, this time in totality, compared to all other seasons by all other players through the league's first 28 years. While 24 Reese does occupy a rebounding tier of her own north of 13, 24 Wilson is basically in a dead heat for second at 11.87. Technically she's third, but she trails 18 Sylvia Fowles by less than 14 thousandths of a board per game. Or in other words, here are some of the players who have never had a season averaging such a high rebounding number. And that kind of proficiency on the glass was of course married with the hyper-efficient bucket getter's 26.87 points that she poured in per game. Not only is that the most ever by over 1.5 points, but no one except Taurasi and Jewel Lloyd had ever even cracked 24. Then we have the sliding scale of the two elements together. No one with a comparable season on the glass had ever even been in her solar system as a scorer, and to the extent anyone had ever been in her solar system as a scorer, it wasn't anyone who was on her glass destruction level. For my money, I'd say the closest sliding scale competitors are probably a couple of Holtzclaw seasons and 07 Lauren Jackson, with her own 23 season right in that range, and there's obviously still plenty of northeastern real estate in between those names and 24 Wilson. But what I find arguably as delightful as the full season production is reveling in some cherry picking at the game level. Now I could reduce myself to cherry picking numbers that happen to be round under the flawed notion that they are inherently more profound than non-round numbers to use as statistical benchmarks. But I consider it common sense that if I'm gonna pick cherries, I might as well opt to pick ones that better optimize my datasets rather than succumb to said flawed notion that often serves only to undermine them. We'll start by staying within the confines of the 2024 season and taking a look at the number of games with at least 26 points, where Wilson recorded 25 of them with no one else in the league having even half as many. But it gets way funnier when we throw a rebounding threshold into the equation, and I know this because I combed through every plausible point-rebound combination. She's got a stranglehold up and down the board, so I'll choose a few of my favorites that produce the most outrageous datasets. Let's start with number of games recording at least 28 points and 8 boards, where she posted 19 of them when no one else had more than 3. And if you think it's impressive that her personal total accounted for 46% of the league-wide total, oh, just you wait. Up the rebound constraint to 10, and her 14 such games represent 61% of the entire league total. Crank it to a dozen, and her dozen such games represent 3/4 of the entire league's output. And even that can be one-upped by upping the points by 1. The final two we'll look at within just the 2024 season are number of games with at least 26 points and 15 boards, where she was responsible for 8 of the W's 10 such contests, and last but not least 28 points and 15 boards, where she bested the rest of her peers 6-1. Now we'll zoom out to assess how 24 Wilson stacks up across WNBA history in terms of most games in a season reaching certain benchmarks, and to be fair, we'll remove her inherent advantage of a longer schedule than those from earlier years and pretend as though any season longer than 34 games ended after game 34. And she still laps her competition. Wilson scored at least 28 points in 20 of her first 34 games that season, which is 54% more than runner-up Taurasi. And while she continues her domination as to the number of games reaching just about any point-rebound combo, I've got 3 favorites. Attach 10 rebounds to those 28 points, and her 14 such games are good for double that of runner-up 18 Liz Cambage. With the rebounding threshold increased to 11, she was still able to have 13 such games when no one else ever had more than 5 in a season, and with a 29th point tacked on, even that swells up to nearly triple the number anyone else had ever amassed. Hell, her 12 games with at least 28 points and 12 boards in 2024 alone is a number no one but Tina Charles had surpassed in an entire career, and the same holds true for her 10 games with at least 29 and 12. There is no one else in WNBA history, and quite frankly barely any athletes period, for which there also exists any possible cherry picking able to produce those sorts of discrepancies at anywhere near those sorts of degrees. And on top of all that, she was also her usual magnificent defensive self en route to her third consecutive first-team all-defense nod, with the league's best rim protector rejecting 2.58 shots per game. That didn't just lead the league that season, with only a couple others even close, but it was the highest average since 2016 Brittany Griner. Now, while it's true Wilson's 2024 season looks like a slam dunk as the most dominant ever amongst rebound-gobbling bigs, there are of course other all-time greats among other player archetypes. There's wings such as Taurasi and Moore, assassins who could shoot the lights out and score at will from anywhere on the floor, and there's pure point guards like Sue Bird and Caitlin Clark, whose dynamic passing could masterfully set the table and run the show while still being able to create plenty for themselves. And that's in addition to some other fellow destroyers down low. But it is virtually impossible to argue that through the league's first 28 seasons, any WNBA player from any position played at a level approaching that of 2024 A'ja Wilson. Though that's not exactly breaking any shocking news, and it appeared obvious as her season was unfolding, what is shocking is just how much separation she ultimately generated between herself and any other top contenders. Really, it's hard to make a case that anyone else has had a regular season that's even come close. After an MVP vote that carried about as much suspense as whether or not the anvil's gonna hit Wile E. Coyote, Wilson joined Cynthia Cooper from the league's inaugural season as the only WNBA players to ever unanimously win the award. And in the midst of said unanimous MVP season in the WNBA, she turned in an MVP performance at the Paris Olympics, where her 19 points and 10 boards per game powered the USA to more golden glory. Heading into 2024, cases for the greatest all-time women's basketball player could be made for several other candidates headlined by such luminaries as Diana Taurasi, Lisa Leslie, Lauren Jackson, Maya Moore, Tamika Catchings, Candace Parker, Brianna Stewart, Cheryl Swoops, Swoops' Comets teammate Cynthia Cooper, and, if you want to go old school, Cooper's teammate at the other USC, Cheryl Miller. But when you stack Wilson's 2024 campaign, that's pretty clearly the preeminent individual season in league history, on top of her Mount Everest of pre-24 exploits, to me it's tough to argue that didn't catapult her into the driver's seat of the greatest of all time conversation. And by the end of just her age 27 season too. As she adds the longevity of her prime years to her still budding career, that'll likely simply relegate everyone else in her rearview mirror to be further and further in the distance. Thanks for watching Secret Base. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. If you want to get a peek at even more stuff and see your name included alongside all these other very smart and good-looking people, subscribe to Secret Base on Patreon.